Hello, my name is Noboru Tanaka from Kobe University, Japan. So today I will talk about classroom practice in citizenship education. The title of my presentation is Lead Questioning Questions. In dialogical and inquiry-based education, students are often encouraged to make their own questions. This is usually seen as an important part of democratic learning. It is connected with student voice agency and participation. I agree, the students' questions are very important. However, in this presentation, I would like to take one more step. Instead of asking only how students make questions, I ask what happened when students begin to think about what the question is. The main question of this presentation is what happens when students do not simply generate the questions, but collectively re-question what a question is. In many inquiry-based lessons, questions are used at the starting points. Students make questions, choose one, and then begin investigation or discussion. But one point is often left aside. We do, we do not always ask what questioning itself means for students. So today, I focus on practice in which students did not move quickly from question to answers. Instead, they paused and asked, what is a question? What does questioning to do us? And what kind of learning may emerge from this process? Student-generated inquiry has been widely valued in education. When students make their own questions, they may feel more ownership of learning. Their interests and concerns can enter the classroom. They may also take a more active role in the learning process. For these reasons, student-generated questions are often linked with agency, voice, ownership, and participation. This is also one of the strengths of P4C. Do you know P4C? Philosophy for Children. Children's questioning, children's questions are not treated as small or unimportant. They are taken seriously as starting points for inquiry. However, there is still one question we need to ask. We often value the fact that students make questions, but we do not always examine what questioning itself means in their learning. Questions are often treated as a for learning, tool for learning. They begin inquiry, guide investigation, and show student interest. Of course, this law is important, but questions can do more than that. Questions may change how students see the world. They may, they may connect the self with others and why with daily experience. They may also give rise to further questions. So the issue is not only what is inside the question, it is also what questioning does to students. This point is important for citizenship education. Citizenship is not only about having opinions on social issues, it is also about learning to see the world as something that can be questioned. To think about this, I use the idea of learning as a effect. In many educational settings, learning is understood as an achievement of predefined goals. Students are expected to gain certain knowledge, skills, or attitudes. These goals are important, but learning can also be understood in another way. Learning may emerge through dialogue. It may happen when students meet different views, feel uncertainty, and begin to see things differently. In this sense, Learning is not only the result of teaching, it is also an effect that appears through the process of experience and dialogue. In this presentation, I use this idea to examine not only what students learn through inquiry, but also how their understanding of inquiry itself changes. This slide shows the main shift in this presentation. In student-generated inquiry, students make questions and those questions begin the inquiry. In re-questioning questions, students inquire into what a question is. Questioning itself becomes the object of inquiry. This changes the meaning of agency. Agency is not only expressing one's one question, it also includes reflecting on one's relation to the world through questionings. It also changes the meaning of participation. Participation is not only speaking in class, it is also making meaning together with others. So the shift is from using question for learning to learning what questioning can become. Let me now introduce a classroom practice. This practice was conducted in the Japanese middle school as a part of citizenship education and social studies. It was inspired by philosophy for children and the idea of a community of inquiry by Dewey, John Dewey. The aim was not simply to help students make good questions. The main, the aim was to create a space where students could think together about the meaning of questioning themselves. The lesson was titled Re-Questioning Questions. The central theme was very simple. What is a question for you? What is a question for you? Students first thought about this. Students first thought about this individually. Then they discussed it in small groups, shared their ideas, and brought them into the whole class discussion. The lesson had five main steps. First, students reflected individually on the question, what is question for you? Second, they discussed their idea in small groups. Third, each group shared what they had talked about. Fourth, the class discussed these ideas together. Then, after students had already experienced the inquiry through dialogue, the teacher asked them to return once again the same issues. Now that you have experienced inquiry, what is question? So, the lesson moved for defining question to experiencing what question do. This is the thing. This picture is the thing of class lesson. In the first discussion, students described questioning in many rich ways. One student said that finding question is everyday life, and doubting what seems ordinary can enrich oneself. Another student said that a question has many possible answers, that it begins from one's own doubt, and that these points are connected. Another student said that the question is something we cannot answer with certainty within the limit of what we already know. Other students said that questions are different from person to person. They involved depth. And that while thinking about one question, further question may appear. Already at these stages, students were not treating questions as simple requests for answers. They were beginning to see questions as open, personal, and generative. At this point, teacher made an important move. The teacher said, now that you have to experience an inquiry, if you re-question questions, once again, what is a question? This was not simply a summary of the lesson, it changed the direction of inquiry. Students had first talk about questions from their own ideas. Now they were invited to think again, but this time through the experience that they had shared. In other words, the experience of inquiry itself became material for further inquiry. This moment is important because it made the lesson self-reflective. Students were not only discussing questions, they were also using their own experience of dialogue to rethink what questions are. After this intervention, some students described a change in their understanding. One student said that at first a question seemed like simply asking something, but later the student came to think that question is something through which individual ideas are shared, taken up by others, and even shape each person. Another student said that at first a question was something for reviewing one's own thinking, but while thinking about questions, new questions appeared, so the student came to see questions as linked to one another. These comments show an important shift. Questions were no longer seen only as objects the student produced. They were understood as processes that connected people, changing thinking, and generate further inquiry. What then did students learn through this practice? I'd like to point out four things. First, students came to see the questions are not only tools for finding answers. Second, they began to see that questions connect people. A question starts from one person, but it can be shared, changed, and deepened with others. Third, students began to look back on inquiry itself. Students began to look back on inquiry itself. They did not only discuss a topic, they also thought about what it means to ask questions. And fourth, this has an important meaning for citizenship education. Citizenship education is not only about having opinions or taking part in discussion, it is also about learning how to meet the world through questions. To notice something in daily life, to wonder about it, and to stay open to other ways of seeing. These are also important part of democratic learning. Let me conclude. Student-generated inquiry is important. It gives students a voice. It also brings their own concerns into the classroom. But democratic education needs one more step. Students also need chance to ask, what is a question? What do questions do to us? And what can become possible through questioning? In this sense, re-questioning question is not only preparation for inquiry, it is already a form of democratic inquiry. In this lesson, students did not only make questions, they came to see questions in new ways. A question can enrich the self, it can connect people, and it can open the world a little differently. So, thank you very much for listening. If you have some wondering or comment, please send me email. And the first slide showed my email address. So I hope next year I'm presenting in person for size meetings. So thank you very much indeed. My name is Noboru Tanaka. Thank you so much.